Mental math answers. Here we go. Negative a half times negative a half is positive 1/4. What we do here is 1.2 squared is the same as 1.2 times 1.2, or what I think of as 12 times 12 with 2 decimal points. So that would be 144 with 2 digits behind the decimal point. And then this basically means 12 plus 12, right? So 24. All right, this one, in order to do it, I was thinking really 24 divided by 6 is 4, right? Or 2.4 divided by 0.6 is 4. So the top is 4 times the bottom. So in this case, this top is 4 times the bottom. So if you multiply 0.25 times 4, or you think you've got 4 quarters, really, you have $1. So C equals 1, if that makes sense to you. Okay, hopefully it does. Convert 150 centimeters to meters, and we move the decimal twice, so we get 1.5 meters. 12.5% of 80. Well, 12.5% means 1/8, right? Because we've memorized that. So 1/8 of $80. We take 80 and divide it by 8, and it's 10. So $10 is an eighth, or 12.5% of 80. And then 12.5% less than 80, just take that $10 away and you got 70 bucks. Okay, here we go. We are going to do equations with exponents like this. This is new. You've been solving equations where this didn't exist, this little square symbol, right? So let's see what it means when we have this little square symbol. I will tell you that if you have a square, if you have any exponents in an equation, the biggest exponent, which is 2, is going to tell you how many possible answers you can get for this. So if I see a square, it tells me we're going to have 2 possible answers. Not just one number will work, 2 numbers are going to work. If this were a cube, 3 numbers would work to answer this, would work for x, okay? So let's see what we mean. That means we can replace x with 2 different options and get 28. Okay, so we solve them the same way almost. The first part we solve the same way as we did on our worksheets. And first we want to do subtract 1 from both sides. Still get the x alone. So we have this, right? Okay, we still want to get x alone, so we would divide both sides by 3. And when we do that, we get x squared equals 9, okay? So what that means is what times itself equals 9, okay? Or we really could, it's the square root, x squared. The square root of 9 is our answer. Now remember we talked about there are 2 square roots of 9. There is x equals, or sorry, yes, 2 square roots of 9. X could equal 3, or it can also equal -3, right? So if we did 3 squared, -3 times -3, we get 9, or if we did +3. So there we have 2 answers that work. Okay. Later on in algebra, I'm going to take, once you get to this line, I'm going to show you now, some of you will get this, some won't. To undo this square, we take the square root of both sides. Remember how we can balance things? So if we took the square root of x squared, what happens is that just turns into an x, and this means plus or minus 3. So this is how we're going to do it in algebra. It's just a little preview. But for you guys this year, you can just go like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this next one. Maybe even shut me off and see if you can solve it. Alright, we're going to add 1. And now we get 3x squared equals 48. Divide both sides by 3. And you'll get to where you start to remember your 16 multiples of 16. So 3 goes into 48 16 times. Okay? Ooh, isn't that nice? It's a perfect square. So what times itself makes a 16? Well, 4 does, and so does -4. So we're going to say x equals 4 or -4. Okay, or we could say plus minus 4, remember? Okay, now we will do the next one. Divide both sides by 2. And now we get x squared equals 5. Uh-oh, this we did the other day. Where, like, what is the square root of 5? Well, that's not a perfect square. So when it's not a perfect square, we say x equals square root of 5 or the negative square root of 5. Do you guys remember that? We did this in class, the square root of 5. And we don't do anything beyond that. We just write square root of 5 and negative square root of 5. Okay? So because it's an irrational number, we leave it in radical form. And make sure this negative is on the outside. We don't put it on the inside, right? Okay, example 3. We get to create an equation out of an English sentence. So I find that to be quite thrilling. Hopefully you do too. 5 less than what numbered squared? I think it should be what number squared. Yes, sorry. I'm not going to fix that online. You can cross it out. 5 less than what number squared is 20. 5 less than what number squared? So what number squared? I'm going to use an n squared. Okay, 5 less than that, we would subtract 5, and that equals 20. So 5 less than what number squared equals 20. Always kind of read it back and see if it makes sense. It does. All right, or it follows that sentence. So we're going to add 5 to both sides, and now we have n squared equals 25, and that's a nice perfect square. And so we're going to say n equals, I'm going to write it this way today, or on this one, n equals plus or minus 5. Okay? Alrighty, let's look at the next question, number 4, and we're going to well, let's read it. In this figure, the area of the larger square, the big square, is 4 square units, which is twice the area of the smaller square. What is the length of each side of the smaller square? Okay, so when you read stuff like this, that might be very confusing to you. So let me write on our picture. Okay, the area of the larger square is 4 square units, right? So we could figure out what the area of the larger square is. But let's just say, let's take this, which is twice. We're going to actually make a sentence out of this, okay? Or an equation out of this, okay? 4 square units is twice the area of the smaller square, okay? So if you double the area, I'll write it this way, of the small square, you get the big square, right? I'm showing you this. They show a little different. Twice the area of the small square gives you the area of the large square, right? Okay, but the area of the small square is, let's call this, the sides are s, right? So the area of the small square is s times s, or it's s squared. Remember, area of a square is side squared. So let's say this, twice the area of the smaller, which is twice squaring the sides, will equal the area of the big one. Okay, so the book kind of tells you that, not much different than I do. I said it 3 different ways. Hopefully that makes sense. It might be a little weird for you, so it's okay if that one makes you uncomfortable. Okay, so if we double the area of the small square, we get the area of the large square, which happens to be 4. Okay, so now we're going to solve that using the tricks we learned. So we get side squared equals 2. So what is the length of this side? What is s? It is, now be careful here. You're going to want to say plus or minus the square root of 2, right? However, can you have a negative length? No, you could never have a negative length. Okay, so when we're dealing with real life images and sides and lengths, you can only deal with positive numbers. Okay, so your answer is square root of 2 is the side length. Okay, and I guess we're talking about units. They didn't tell us, you know. Oh, yeah, they tell us it's units. Okay, last example, we have a proportion. So let's do the cross product. Okay, so if we do x times x, we get x squared equals 36, right? And so what times itself equals 36? That would be plus or minus 6. And that's it. That one was a nice one for the end. Okay, now the rest is practice. Do your very best to do that on your own, please. And then come back for help, okay? The more you try and do on your own and then come back and check, the better you will do overall. And you'll have a better understanding of pre-algebra, and next year will be better for you. Okay, here we go. Solve each equation. I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So I get, sorry, let me move my camera. We get 3x squared equals 108. Divide both sides by 3. X squared equals, let's see, 3 goes into 10. 3, 18. So would that be 36? I believe so. So x equals 6 or negative 6. Okay. Next, ooh. Tricky one, we haven't done these in a while. X squared plus x squared. These are like terms, aren't they? And so there's a ghost 1 here, and that means 2x squared equals 12. Okay, we add those x squares because they are like terms. Now we're going to divide both sides by 2, and we get x squared equals 6. Okay, and 6 is not a perfect square, so we can't just take the square root of 6, right? We could, but we'd end up having to round. So we're going to say x equals plus or minus the square root of 6. Okay, or you could have said square root of 6 comma negative square root of 6, which is what the book has in the solution manual. Okay, letter C, 5 less than twice what negative number squared is 157? Oh, 5 less than twice what negative number squared is, 157. Okay, so how we set this up is twice a negative number squared. Okay, that is very tricky. So it's okay if that bothered you. Don't panic. Twice a negative number squared, okay, equals, 5 less than it, so we got to do minus 5 equals 157. Okay, so before I add 5 to both sides, I'm going to take care of this, okay? Negative number squared, what this is telling me here is negative n times negative n, right? There's 2 of them. So when we get negative n times negative n, we get a positive n squared. Okay, so this whole thing can be replaced with positive n squared. And we have a 2 in front of it, so it's 2n squared minus 5 equals 157. Okay, now we add the 5. And we have 2n squared equals 162. Okay, so n squared equals 81. Okay, so again, we go back and it says what negative number. So our answer is going to be a negative number. So the square root of 81 is 9, or negative 9. But they said what negative number. So we need n to be negative 9. Okay, now the next one, the product of the square of a positive number and 7. So if we square a number and the product, they're saying the product of a number, square of a number, and 7. That means n squared times 7, okay? And so I put the 7 out in front. So that's the product of the square of a number and 7, okay? Equals 21. And now we have it ready to solve. So we get n squared equals 3. So if we just solve this without going back and looking at the problem, n is going to be plus or minus the square root of 3. But then let's go back. It says we're looking for a positive number. So that means negative doesn't count. So our final answer is just positive square root of 3. Okay, the last one is okay, now this one, cross multiply or find the cross product. So get w squared equals 36. So w equals 6 or negative 6. Okay, there you have it.